And by the way, if you go to author101.com, you can see the 4 books teaching you how to do this, but you can get them in the library. But the first thing is to write a book proposal, talking about, exactly who you are, what the book's about, what are you going to do when the book comes out to promote it, what makes you different from everybody else, what is your platform, do you have a radio show, do you have a big list, have you been on radio and TV, why will other people want to read your book, sample chapters, etc. So there's lots of great books in the library on how to write a book proposal, in addition to ours, but it will help you no matter what you're doing, focus on what you want to do by just writing that book proposal. So that's step 1. In fact, there's a guy named Tim Ferriss we helped, and he ended up writing the 4-Hour Work Week. And that book came out of just a fabulous book proposal that we helped him with. And he's just a great, great guy, but that book has sold a ton. And it all came from a really great book proposal. Secondly, you probably, to sell it to a major publisher, you need a literary agent. Now, that's a problem because it's kind of a catch-22. And a catch-20, meaning you can't find a literary agent unless you know somebody, and they're not going to take you unless, you have a great book. But I work with about 100 literary agents. In fact, I list a lot of them in my $1 Million Rolodex, which you're all starting to get. But generally, to get a literary agent, you need to get them through a connection of some sort. Because literary agents get hundreds and hundreds of query letters a week, and most of them just go in the garbage. So, but the literary agent sells your book most of the time to an editor at a publishing house, McGraw-Hill, Simon Schuster, etc., where they accept your book. They may or may not give you an advance, which is a loan against your future royalties. And your book usually comes out about 18 months later. The main thing a publisher does is design the book, get the cover design, print it, and then get into bookstores and on Amazon, etc. But it's your job to sell the book and to really promote it. And so as a publisher, what we're looking for is someone who's going to have not only a great book, but a great platform and be willing to sell it when the book comes out. When I say sell it, I mean do publicity, have all your websites ready to go, have your list ready to go, have radio shows, have a bunch of people who love you and love what you do. Maybe you're doing speeches around the country, and possibly a budget even to hire a PR firm. So that's kind of the first way of getting published, which is traditional publishing. All my books are out with a traditional publisher. The problem is it takes a long time to get published. Generally, the publisher doesn't give you much money. They don't do anything for you when your book comes out, which is pretty much all publishers. And you sign away your rights. And then when your book comes out, you have about 3 months to make it count. And then the books come back. So it's really a very, kind of tough system. The second way of getting... Yes.
And before you go on, just 2 things about that. Say a little more about that.
I hope we have time to answer questions, too. Okay.
Yeah, when we get them from the chat room, I will definitely make sure we take them. And,
okay.
And in the 3 months to make it count, just say a little bit more about that, because I think that's one of the things people that, again, this shouldn't be something to discourage people, but it's just getting the real picture of how it is, because I think there's the illusion. I always had it, and I know people I tell now this information, people think that you write the book and then you just turn it over and then it goes out and becomes a bestseller because the publisher just handles everything. So A, you're destroying that myth, and then B, just say a little bit more about that 3 months to make it count, because that's an important piece, which then I'm sure some of the information you're going to give us afterwards is going to kind of give a solution to that. So.
Yes. Okay. Well, the problem is that there's not a lot of space on the shelves, and I'll tell you why. A typical huge Barnes & Noble bookstore, if it opens, has space for maybe 100,000 books. Okay. Well, there are 400,000 books published a year, so right there you don't have a lot of room. But now let's talk about, out of those 100,000 books on the shelf, let's talk about every other book that has been published before you, like Gone with the Wind, or To Kill a Mockingbird, or the Bible, or whatever. Well, those books are still selling because they're just favorites. So literally, the Barnes & Noble buyer and Borders and Books A Million may order 1 book per bookstore or 3 books per bookstore. Well, if they don't sell in the first 3 months after they ordered the book, if they just sit there, then what do? They send them back. And that's the problem we have with publishing now, is that it's returns. Is that these days, the typical return rate is about 50% or higher, meaning they order your book, it sits there, for 2-3 months, and then whatever doesn't sell, they send back. So a book actually isn't sold until it's sold. It's actually in the bookstore on consignment. So it's a really crazy system. Now, what has helped us is we have Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com, and I think more and more people are just buying their books online. And they're sitting in a warehouse, but they're not necessarily having to be on the bookshelf. So it's available online, and that's where we're driving most of our book sales. But I'll tell you, it's a real trip, and it's really exciting to go into Barnes & Noble and go into Borders and seeing your book out there, face out or on the end cap, or on a table. That's really cool. But very few authors actually get to see that because it's just so hard to get that space. In fact, most of that space on the tables and out front are either for huge bestsellers or are bought space, which is called co-op advertising, where the publisher actually pays Barnes & Noble to keep your book there for a month and with the hopes that it will sell. It's like when you go into a supermarket and you go into the cereal aisle, you'll see Cheerios right in front of you. Well, Cheerios buys that space. Well, it's the same thing in the book world. So it's a very difficult system, and that's why publicity and marketing is so important, that when that book comes out, we want to move those books and get it on bestseller lists, and so that the bookstores don't send them back. So let's talk about a couple other ways to get published. Now some good news. The other way you can get published is you can self-publish, which in my view is a pain in the butt. There's a guy named Dan Pointer, the #1 guy in the world on self-publishing, with a website called parapublishing.com, where you actually, design the book, print the book, do everything yourself. And then, you usually spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, and you have 5,000 books printed, and they're usually sitting in your garage and don't go anywhere. And there's a lot of barracudas out there who are happy to take your money but not do the right thing. So I would not love to see you self-publish, because you can spend a lot of money, have a crappy-looking book, and then just have it sit in your garage. So not a great thing to do. These days, the new way of self-publishing is through POD, which is called Print on Demand. And it is, in my view, it's kind of the farm team approach. It's a great way to get going if you can't get a publisher to accept your book. And literally, you can have a book out in 3 months for as little as, $1,000. I mean, there's different packages, but it doesn't cost. Remember I said it can cost you $15,000, $20,000. You can have it for $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, where the publisher does everything, gets your book on the internet. And print on demand means, here's how it works, is that if I were doing your book in a print on demand format and I buy your book today on Amazon, literally we print the book and the cover and do everything tomorrow and ship it tomorrow night. The technology is amazing. So you do it 1 book at a time, or you can do 10 at a time or 20 at a time, and it's incredible. So everybody get ready to write. We have actually a new division, which is part of the biggest POD company in the world, called Persona Publishing. Persona, Persona Publishing. And you can have your book published in like 3 months for a very little amount of money. The only negative is,